The courtroom was quiet. Only the sound of papers flipping and footsteps could be heard. It was just another day for the judge. He sat high on his seat, looking over the room with a serious face. Lawyers, police, and people from the public sat in their places, waiting for the next case. Suddenly, the doors opened. A small boy, around 12 years old, walked in. His shoes were worn out. His shirt was too big for him. He had no lawyer, no parents with him, just a tired face and eyes full of pain. People began whispering, "Who is he? Why is a child here alone?" But the boy kept walking, slowly, step by step, toward the judge. He stopped in the middle of the courtroom and looked up. The judge looked at the boy, confused. "Who are you, son?" he asked. The boy's voice was soft but clear. "You don't remember me, do you?" he said. The judge raised his eyebrows. "Should I?" The boy took a deep breath. Then he said the words that made the whole courtroom freeze. "You abandoned me." Everyone went silent. The judge stared at the boy, shocked. He sat back in his chair, like someone had just hit him in the chest. "You must be mistaken," the judge said, trying to keep his voice calm. But the boy shook his head. "I'm not. I'm here because I need answers, and you're the only one who can give them." The judge looked around the room, uncomfortable. Reporters started taking notes. A lawyer leaned forward in surprise. Even the guard near the door looked nervous. "Bailiff," the judge said, "take this boy outside. He doesn't belong here." But the boy stood strong. "I do belong here," he said loudly. "This is the only place you can't walk away from me." There was power in his words. He was just a kid, but in that moment, he held the whole room in his hands. "I lost my mother last month," the boy continued, his eyes getting wet. "Before she died, she told me the truth. She told me everything. About you. About how you left." The judge looked away. He seemed pale now. His hands were shaking. "I waited for years," the boy said, his voice breaking. "I kept thinking, maybe he'll come. Maybe one day he'll show up and say, 'I'm sorry.' But you never did." People in the courtroom were now wiping their eyes. Even the judge's assistant looked heartbroken. The boy pulled something from his pocket. It was an old photo, faded, torn at the edges. He held it up for everyone to see. "This is me. And that's my mom. And that," he pointed, "is you." The judge's eyes went wide. He knew the photo. He remembered that day. A day he had buried deep in his mind, hoping it would never come back. "I don't want money," the boy said. "I don't want revenge. I just want to know why." The judge leaned forward, slowly. "Why now?" he whispered. "Because I'm tired of the silence," the boy said. "I'm tired of pretending I don't care." There was a long pause. Then the judge said, "Court will take a 10-minute break." But his voice was shaking. He stood up, turned around, and walked out the back door, his head down, his heart heavy. The boy stayed there, standing alone. But he didn't look weak. He looked strong, like a boy who had waited his whole life for this moment, and was finally heard. Everyone in the courtroom remained still. No one moved. No one spoke. And in that silence, a new story had just begun. The courtroom was still. No one moved. No one even dared to breathe as Malik's words echoed in the air, leaving a haunting silence in their wake. Everyone was staring at the young boy standing in front of the judge, his face a mixture of anger, sadness, and a kind of vulnerability that made the situation feel even more raw. The weight of his words had clearly struck everyone in the room. The judge, who had seen many things over the years, was now facing something entirely new. His years of experience in the courtroom had prepared him for countless cases, criminals, civil disputes, child custody battles. But nothing like this. This was personal. This was a child whose pain had been ignored, and the reality of his suffering was now in front of the judge. The truth was impossible to deny, no matter how hard anyone tried. The boy's words seemed to hang in the air, thick and heavy, refusing to dissipate. His small figure stood in stark contrast to the immense emotions swirling around the courtroom. Malik wasn't just a child speaking out of turn. He wasn't simply expressing the anger of a young person frustrated with life. This was a confrontation, a direct challenge to the man who, in the eyes of the young boy, had abandoned him when he needed someone most. Malik took a deep breath, steadying himself. He wasn't going to stop now. This was his moment, the one chance he had to finally express everything that had been building inside him for so long. His voice, though still shaky, grew stronger as he continued. "I don't care about the rules or the laws or how it works in here," he said, gesturing vaguely at the courtroom. "I care about the truth. And the truth is, you left me in that place. You never came to see me. You didn't even try to help me. I was just another file, another case, another number to you, right?" There was a sharp intake of breath from the audience. Malik's words hit like a punch to the gut. Everyone in the room, even the judge, seemed to recoil at the weight of what he was saying. The boy's pain was so raw, so real, that it felt like a physical blow. Malik's eyes were locked on the judge now. The man who had been a symbol of authority and justice to him for so long suddenly seemed small, almost insignificant. How could someone with so much power be so unaware of the pain of a child? How could someone responsible for overseeing cases like his, year after year, not have known the truth of what was happening to him? The judge opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked down at the papers in front of him, as if searching for some kind of answer, some justification for his actions. But there was nothing. Nothing could explain what Malik had gone through. Nothing could explain why the system had failed him so completely. "I was in that place for years," Malik continued, his voice growing more passionate. "I cried myself to sleep every night, hoping that someone would come, that someone would care enough to find me. But no one did. Not you, not anyone." The boy paused for a moment, looking down at his hands. For a brief second, he seemed to falter, as if the weight of his own words was too much to bear. But then he looked up again, his eyes now filled with determination. "I used to wonder if you even knew I was there," he whispered, his voice cracking. "If you ever thought about me at all. I wanted to believe that you cared, that you would find me and make sure I was okay. But now I know. You didn't. You didn't even try." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The people sitting in the audience were now watching with wide eyes, their hearts aching for the boy who had been abandoned and forgotten by the very people meant to protect him. It was clear that no one had expected this. No one had anticipated such raw emotion, such an unfiltered outpouring of pain. The judge, visibly shaken, placed his hand on the table in front of him. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the wood, trying to steady himself. It was as though he was seeing the reality of the situation for the first time. It was impossible to ignore the truth Malik was speaking, and it was impossible to deny the failure of the system that had allowed this child to slip through the cracks. The judge began, but his voice faltered. He cleared his throat, struggling to find the words. I didn't know." Malik's eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and anger flashing across his face. "You didn't know?" he repeated, almost incredulously. "How is that even possible? You're the judge. You're supposed to know everything that happens to kids like me. You're supposed to make sure we're not forgotten." The words stung, and they were aimed directly at the heart of the judge's failure. The truth was, the judge had known. He had known that Malik was in foster care, and he had known that things weren't going well for him. But the system had been too slow. The reports had been lost in paperwork. The child had been lost in the shuffle. And by the time the judge had realized how badly Malik had been neglected, it was too late. "I'm sorry," the judge said quietly, the weight of his own failure pressing down on him. "I never meant for this to happen." But the apology felt hollow. Malik didn't need words. He needed action. He needed someone to take responsibility for what had happened to him, for the years he had lost, for the pain he had endured. Words couldn't fix what had been broken. Words couldn't heal the hurt that ran so deep in his heart. "I don't want your apology," Malik said, his voice firm. "I want you to fix it. I want you to make sure this doesn't happen to another kid ever again." The judge looked at him, his face pale and lined with regret. He knew this was more than just a legal case. This was about accountability. This was about making things right. And in that moment, the weight of what needed to be done became clear. As the boy's words echoed in the courtroom, everyone was forced to confront the truth. The system had failed him. The judge had failed him. But now, there was a chance to do something about it. Now, the real question was, what would be done? Would anyone step up? Would anyone take responsibility? Or would Malik's pain remain just another forgotten story? The room waited, holding its breath, for what would happen next. The tension in the courtroom was so thick it could almost be touched. After Malik's heart-wrenching words had filled the room, there was a moment of silence that stretched longer than anyone had expected. The judge, still sitting at his bench, remained frozen, unable to offer anything more than a stunned expression. The crowd around them seemed to sense that the air had shifted somehow. This wasn't just a case, it was something much deeper, something more personal, something that had been buried for years and was now being unearthed, piece by painful piece. Malik stood there, his chest rising and falling with each shaky breath. His hands were clenched tightly by his sides, and his eyes were filled with a mixture of pain and resolve. The boy wasn't looking for sympathy or pity. He was seeking answers, validation, and something that had been denied to him for too long. The truth. He needed the people in this room to understand. He needed them to know what he had been through, and why he was standing here now, demanding to be heard. There was a shift in the judge's expression. The stoic, emotionless mask that had once been there was now replaced with something more vulnerable, something closer to guilt. The judge had always been a man of rules, of procedure. He had followed the law, and in doing so, he had convinced himself that he was doing the right thing. But now, faced with the reality of Malik's pain, the judge realized that the law wasn't enough. The rules weren't enough. The system had failed this boy in a way that went beyond paperwork and procedures. It had failed him in a way that had torn his life apart. Malik's voice broke the silence again, quieter this time, but still full of emotion. "I was just a little kid when it all started," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "I didn't know what was happening. I didn't understand why I was suddenly all alone." He paused, the memories seemingly flooding his mind. For a moment, his eyes seemed to lose focus, and it was clear he was slipping back into a past that still haunted him. The boy's words were heavy with pain. The crowd remained silent, waiting for him to continue, not wanting to interrupt the gravity of what he was saying. "When my parents disappeared, I didn't know where they went. I didn't know why they didn't come back. All I knew was that I was left behind, and no one cared to explain why." Malik swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he continued. "The system didn't protect me. It just moved me from one place to another, one foster home to another, but nothing ever felt like home. I felt like I was just drifting, floating through life without a place where I belonged." The judge, who had once seen this as just another case to handle, now saw the truth of the boy's pain. Malik wasn't just a child who had been placed in foster care. He wasn't just a statistic or a case file. He was a human being with dreams, with fears, with hopes that had been crushed by the very system that was meant to protect him. The system had failed him in ways the judge couldn't have imagined, and the boy had been left to suffer alone, feeling forgotten and abandoned. Malik's eyes became clouded with the memories of his time in foster care. "I remember waking up every morning wondering if this was the day someone would come and say, 'It's time to go home.' But that never happened. The days turned into months, the months into years, and I just kept waiting. But nothing changed. No one came. No one cared. The courtroom was absolutely still. People were listening to every word. Some of them even had tears in their eyes, their hearts breaking for the young boy who had been forced to live through something so painful and traumatic. No one could deny the truth of what he was saying. No one could ignore the scars that ran deeper than the surface, scars that no one had bothered to heal. Malik's voice became stronger as he spoke about the system that had failed him. The system wasn't made to help kids like me. It wasn't made to care. I was just a name on a list, a face in a crowd. They kept moving me from place to place, home to home. But no one ever took the time to see what I needed. No one ever asked me how I was doing. I was just another case file, and to them, that was enough. His eyes darted to the judge now. "And you," Malik said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were the one who was supposed to make sure I was okay. You were the one who was supposed to be my voice, to be my protector. But you never came. You never showed up. You just signed the papers and moved on to the next case, the next name on the list." The judge's face hardened as Malik spoke, but there was a sadness in his eyes now. He had heard similar stories before, but hearing them from someone so young, someone who had been directly affected, was something else entirely. The weight of Malik's words was crushing, and for the first time in a long while, the judge felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel for years: guilt. "I never knew it was this bad," the judge muttered softly, almost to himself. "I never knew the extent of your pain, Malik. I thought the system was working. I thought everything was fine. I didn't realize how deeply you were hurting." Malik looked at him, the pain in his eyes more apparent than ever. "You didn't know. You didn't even try to know. How could you not know? I was just a kid. I was alone, and you didn't even see me. You didn't even try." The judge wanted to respond, to explain himself, but no words came. He couldn't justify the system's failure. He couldn't deny the truth that was right in front of him. How could he explain away the hurt this boy had suffered? How could he make it better? How could anyone? For a brief moment, the courtroom felt like a dark and lonely place. The faces of the people sitting in the gallery were etched with sadness, each of them now understanding the depth of Malik's pain. The boy wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every child who had been lost in the system, for every kid who had felt abandoned and forgotten. And it was clear to everyone now, this wasn't just a courtroom drama. This was a cry for help, a cry that had been ignored for far too long. As Malik stood there, his words hanging in the air, he looked around at the people in the courtroom, his eyes searching for someone who would finally see him, truly see him for who he was. Not just a child in the system, not just a forgotten name on a list, but a person, someone worthy of love, of protection, of care. The silence in the room was deafening, and for a moment, it seemed like time had stopped. Everyone was waiting for something, waiting for someone to step up and do what was right. But would they? Would anyone? The clock continued to tick, but in that moment, it felt like the world had come to a halt. The stillness in the courtroom was unlike anything anyone had ever experienced. It was as if the weight of Malik's words had stopped time altogether, leaving everyone trapped in that moment of intense silence. The judge remained seated, his eyes locked on the young boy who had bravely revealed his heartbreaking past. But this time, the judge wasn't just looking at Malik. He was looking at the truth, staring it in the face, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. Malik stood there, his hands clenched tightly by his sides, his body trembling slightly, but his resolve was unshakable. He had spoken his truth. He had confronted the judge with his pain, his abandonment, and his fear. And now, there was nothing left to do but wait and see if anyone at all, was ready to take responsibility for the damage the system had caused. The judge took a deep breath, his face pale, a look of genuine regret etched into his features. He looked at the papers in front of him as though they could offer him some form of explanation, but nothing could. No legal jargon, no procedural rule, no policy could undo what had been done to this child. The judge's eyes then met Malik's again, and for the first time, he saw the boy not as a case, but as a person a human being who had suffered because of his actions or lack thereof. I didn't know, the judge said quietly, his voice shaking. I didn't know the full extent of what you've been through, Malik. I thought the system was doing its job. I thought the foster care system was enough, that it would take care of you like it was supposed to. But now I see. Now I understand. It wasn't enough. Malik didn't flinch. His eyes remained focused on the judge, his face stern but vulnerable. He had waited so long for someone to finally hear him, to finally understand. But even now, as the judge spoke, something inside him was wary. Was this just another empty apology? Another promise that would be forgotten as soon as the courtroom emptied out? You should have known, Malik replied, his voice steady but laced with the pain of years of neglect. You were supposed to know. That's what you were there for, to protect me, to make sure I wasn't falling through the cracks. But you didn't, and I paid for it. The judge lowered his gaze for a moment, ashamed. He could feel the weight of Malik's accusation deep in his chest. It wasn't just a failure of the system. It was a personal failure. He had been the one who had turned a blind eye. He had been the one who had failed to intervene, to make sure that a child in need was cared for. The guilt of that realization was almost suffocating. I failed you, the judge said softly, looking up at Malik with sorrow in his eyes. And I am so sorry for that. I should have done more. I should have stepped in sooner. I should have made sure you were never forgotten. The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the apology might finally be the start of something real. Malik looked at him, his expression unreadable. The years of pain, anger, and frustration had built up a wall around him, and it wasn't going to come down with just a few words. The damage had been done. But then, something remarkable happened. The judge didn't stop there. His apology wasn't just an empty phrase. His eyes were filled with determination now, a look that said he wasn't going to let this moment pass without doing something to right the wrongs. I promise you, Malik, the judge continued, his voice firmer now, this isn't the end. I will do everything in my power to make sure that what happened to you doesn't happen to another child. I will fight to change the system. I will make sure that the voices of children like you are heard, that the system listens, and I will make sure that your case is revisited, that we do everything we can to make things right. For the first time in a long time, Malik felt a flicker of something inside him, a tiny spark of hope. It wasn't a guarantee. He knew that. But for the first time, someone was taking his pain seriously. Someone was standing up and saying that they were going to do something about it. Malik didn't say anything for a long moment. He just stood there, his heart racing, his emotions still raw but beginning to shift. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. This wasn't going to magically undo everything that had happened. But it was a start. And for the first time in his life, Malik realized that maybe, just maybe, he could begin to heal. I don't know if that's enough, Malik said, his voice quieter now, as if the weight of the conversation had finally begun to sink in. But it's a start, and that's more than I've had in a long time. The judge nodded, understanding the complexity of what he was hearing. I will make sure it is enough, he said firmly. I will make sure we do everything we can to fix this, and I will personally make sure you are not alone again. The courtroom was still silent, but there was a shift in the atmosphere now. The audience, which had watched in stunned silence as Malik poured out his soul, seemed to exhale collectively. Some wiped away tears, some simply nodded in agreement with the judge's words. It was a small moment of victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. For Malik, the feeling was new. It was hard to accept that things could ever truly be fixed, that all the pain he had carried could ever be fully erased. But the idea that someone was willing to stand by him now, that the system could be made better, was a powerful thought. For once, he wasn't just a lost cause. He wasn't just a forgotten name. He was someone who mattered, someone who had been heard. As the court session began to draw to a close, the judge made a final statement to the room. one that would resonate with everyone present. "This is not just about one child," he said, his voice strong now, full of resolve. "This is about an entire system that has failed countless children. And I will make it my mission to ensure that no child, no matter their situation, will ever feel abandoned again." The audience, once filled with uncertainty and sorrow, now seemed to carry a sense of hope. The judge had made a commitment, not just to Malik, but to every child who had ever felt forgotten. He had made a promise to take action, and to ensure that no one else would have to suffer the way Malik had suffered. As Malik stood there, still processing the weight of the moment, he felt a strange sensation. Hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. For the first time, he felt like he might have a future beyond the pain, a future where he wouldn't be invisible anymore. He had come to the courtroom to confront the man who had failed him. But now, he was leaving with something far more valuable. A sense of agency, a sense of hope, and the knowledge that his voice had been heard. And that, he realized, was the first step in truly healing. The courtroom doors swung open, and Malik stepped out into the hallway, his heart still pounding in his chest. The weight of everything that had happened in the past few hours hung heavy on his shoulders, but for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of something new, something different. The cold, sterile halls of the courthouse no longer felt like a place of fear and uncertainty. They felt like the beginning of something that could change his life forever. Malik's eyes moved to the people around him. His attorney, the social workers, even the strangers who had been in the courtroom, all of them silently watching him. But despite their eyes upon him, Malik felt different. He felt stronger, more in control. It was as if the walls that had been built around his heart were starting to crack, just a little. He had done it. He had spoken his truth, and he had been heard. The judge's words still echoed in his mind. "I will make sure you are not alone again." For the first time, Malik believed that promise. The world outside the courtroom still seemed uncertain, but that sense of abandonment, that feeling of being forgotten, had started to fade. He was no longer just a child left to drift through life. For the first time, someone with the power to make change, was listening. And he was going to make sure that Malik's voice wasn't lost in the system. Walking out of the courthouse, Malik took a deep breath. The cold air felt fresh against his skin, like a new beginning. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he knew that he had a chance now. A chance to heal. A chance to rebuild. He could finally imagine a future that didn't feel like a constant battle. As Malik walked down the steps, his steps slow but steady, he heard someone calling his name. He turned, and to his surprise, it was the judge, stepping out of the courthouse behind him. The judge's face was no longer cold or distant. It was filled with something new. Sincerity. "Malik," the judge called, his voice firm but kind. "I just wanted to say, I'm here. I won't forget what you said today. And I will do everything I can to make sure no child feels what you felt. You have my word." Malik paused for a moment, looking at the judge. His eyes searched for any hint of insincerity, any sign that this was just another empty promise. But there was nothing. The judge's eyes were genuine, full of a conviction that Malik had never seen before. He wasn't just a figure of authority now. He was a man willing to make real change. For a moment, Malik felt his breath catch in his throat. It was as if the pain of the past years, the hurt of feeling alone, had begun to dissipate just a little. Maybe, just maybe, things could be different now. "Thank you," Malik said quietly, his voice soft but filled with meaning, "for hearing me." The judge nodded, a small but significant smile on his face. "You've done something powerful today, Malik. You've made sure that your story won't be forgotten, and you've made sure others won't be left behind." Malik didn't know what the future held, but he did know that the past wouldn't define him anymore. He had found his voice, and he had demanded the change he so desperately needed. He had faced his pain head-on, and in doing so, had sparked a fire of hope for himself and for countless others who had suffered in silence. As Malik turned and began walking away, his heart lighter than it had been in years, he couldn't help but glance up at the sky. The clouds were breaking apart, letting through rays of sunlight. The storm that had haunted him for so long seemed to be finally clearing, and with each step he took, it felt like a new chapter of his life was beginning, one filled with hope, strength, and the knowledge that he wasn't alone anymore. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the quiet street as Malik walked away from the courthouse, no longer the scared, forgotten child he once was. He was now someone who had been heard, someone who had been seen. And for the first time in his life, he felt free.